My father's retirement party revealed his betrayal of me. Retirement parties are supposed to be about new beginnings, celebrating years of hard work, toasting to a future of relaxation, and bringing family together for a shared moment of pride. But for me, my father's retirement party turned into a night of betrayal that I'll never forget. I'm Jake, a 25-year-old graphic designer from Denver, Colorado, and I thought I was heading to a simple family gathering to honor my dad, Harry, who just retired at 60 after decades as a construction foreman. Instead, I uncovered a secret that shattered my trust in him. He'd hidden my inheritance, the money my late grandfather left for me, and given it to someone else. What happened that night changed everything between us. The party was held at a rustic event hall in the outskirts of Denver, a charming venue with exposed wooden beams, fairy lights strung across the ceiling, and a wide patio overlooking the mountains, their peaks tinged pink by the setting sun. I arrived a little early, my car crunching over the gravel driveway, the air crisp with the scent of pine and the faint smokiness of a nearby bonfire. I dressed up for the occasion, a navy blazer over a white shirt, my hair neatly combed, a small gift for Dad tucked under my arm, a leather-bound journal I'd found at a local bookstore, perfect for him to jot down his retirement adventures. I wanted the night to be special, a chance to show him how proud I was. Inside, the hall was already filling up with familiar faces. Mom, a 58-year-old librarian with a penchant for oversized scarves, was arranging a table of appetizers, her hands deft as she set out trays of cheese and crackers, the sharp tang of cheddar mixing with the sweetness of grapes. My older sister, Emily, a 28-year-old nurse with a no-nonsense attitude and a love for hiking, was helping her, her laughter ringing out as she teased Mom about her fancy presentation. My younger brother, Noah, a 22-year-old college student with a mop of curly hair and a constant smirk, was fiddling with the sound system, trying to get the playlist of Dad's favorite classic rock songs to play through the speakers, the opening chords of a Rolling Stones track crackling to life. Dad's new wife, Linda, a 55-year-old real estate agent with a warm smile and a habit of overusing exclamation points in her texts, was greeting guests at the door, her arm linked with her son, Ethan, a 19-year-old with a quiet demeanor and a passion for video games. Ethan was Dad's stepson, and while I'd always gotten along with him, he'd even helped me design a logo for a freelance project once I couldn't help but notice the way Dad had been favoring him lately, always talking about Ethan's bright future while brushing off my own achievements. My best friend Ryan, a 26-year-old bartender with a quick wit and a collection of vintage band tees, noticed it too. "Your dad's got a soft spot for the kid," he'd said a few weeks ago, pouring me a beer at his bar, the neon signs casting a red glow over his face. "Don't let it get to you, man." I tried to push the thought aside as I mingled with the guests, the hall growing louder with the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. My Aunt Susan, a 52-year-old yoga instructor with a calming presence and a love for herbal tea, pulled me into a hug, her lavender scent grounding me as she said, "Your dad's so proud of you, Jake." My cousin Mia, a 24-year-old photographer with a knack for capturing candid moments, was snapping photos, her camera clicking as she called out, "Smile, Jake!" I forced a grin, but there was a knot in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't shake, like something was about to go wrong. And as Dad took the stage to give his retirement speech, I had no idea just how right that feeling would be. The event hall glowed with a soft, golden light as Dad stepped up to the microphone, his broad shoulders filling out the gray suit he'd bought just for the occasion. He looked every bit the proud retiree, his face weathered from years on construction sites, his gray hair neatly combed, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The crowd quieted down, the chatter fading into a soft murmur as the fairy lights above twinkled like stars, casting a warm glow over the wooden tables. I stood near the back with Emily, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on Dad with a mix of pride and curiosity. Noah was beside us, his phone out, recording the moment, the faint sound of the Rolling Stones still playing in the background, a low hum beneath the anticipation in the air. "Thank you all for coming out tonight," Dad began, his voice deep and steady, carrying across the room with the confidence of a man who'd spent his life giving orders on job sites. "It means the world to me to have my family and friends here to celebrate this milestone. After 35 years of hard work, I'm ready for a new chapter, more time with Linda, more time with Ethan, and maybe even a few fishing trips. The crowd chuckled, a few people raising their glasses in a toast, the clink of glass on glass echoing softly. I smiled, clapping along with everyone else, but I couldn't help noticing that he hadn't mentioned me or Emily or even Noah for that matter. It stung, but I brushed it off, telling myself I was being too sensitive. Then Dad's tone shifted, his smile tightening as he set his glass down on the podium, his hands gripping the edges like he was bracing himself. "There's something else I need to share," he said, his voice quieter now, but still clear enough for everyone to hear. "Some of you know about the inheritance my father left for my kids' money. He wanted them to use for their futures." My heart skipped a beat, my fingers tightening around the journal I was still holding, the leather cool against my skin. Grandpa had passed away 5 years ago, leaving a modest but meaningful sum for me, Emily, and Noah. Money we'd been told was in a trust until we needed it. I'd been planning to use mine to start my own design business, a dream I'd been working toward for years. "But I made a decision," Dad continued, his eyes flicking toward Ethan, who was standing near Linda, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "I've decided to redirect Jake's share of the inheritance to Ethan. He's got a bright future ahead, and I think it's what's best for the family." The words hit me like a freight train, my breath catching in my throat as the room seemed to tilt around me. The crowd went silent, the only sound the faint crackle of the bonfire outside, the warmth of the evening suddenly feeling suffocating. Emily grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, her voice a harsh whisper as she said, "He can't be serious." Noah lowered his phone, his smirk gone, his eyes wide with shock as he muttered, "What the hell?" I looked around, my vision blurring slightly as I took in the reactions of the guests. Mom's face had gone pale, her scarf slipping off her shoulder as she stared at Dad, her mouth open in disbelief. Aunt Susan set her glass of wine down with a clatter, her calming presence replaced by a look of outrage as she whispered to Mia, who'd stopped taking photos, her camera hanging limply around her neck. Ryan, who'd been leaning against the bar, straightened up, his jaw clenched, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of sympathy and anger. And Linda just smiled, her arm tightening around Ethan, like she'd known this was coming all along. I felt the weight of Dad's words settle into my bones, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could have imagined, and I knew I couldn't let this slide, not here, not now. If this betrayal is shocking you as much as it shocked me, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what would you do if your own family did this to you. The silence in the event hall was suffocating, the kind that makes your ears ring, every small sound amplified in the stillness. The fairy lights above seemed to flicker, casting uneven shadows across the room, and I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, their shock and curiosity pressing against me like a physical force. Dad stood at the podium, his hands still gripping the edges, his expression a mix of defiance and unease, like he knew he'd just dropped a bomb but wasn't sure how bad the fallout would be. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside Linda, his eyes darting to the floor, while Linda's smile faltered, her hand tightening on his arm as she glanced at the crowd. I took a step forward, my shoes scuffing against the wooden floor, the journal in my hand feeling heavier than ever. My heart was pounding, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling inside me, but I forced my voice to stay steady, each word deliberate as I spoke. "You redirected my inheritance?" I said, my voice carrying across the room, cutting through the tension like a knife. "That money was from Grandpa for me, for Emily, for Noah." "You had no right to give it to Ethan." The crowd murmured, a low hum of whispers rippling through the guests, their eyes darting between me and Dad, the air thick with anticipation. Dad's face hardened, his jaw clenching as he straightened up, his voice sharp now, defensive. "I had every right, Jake," he said, his tone cold, his eyes finally meeting mine. "You're doing fine, you've got a job, a career. Ethan needs this more than you do. He's got potential, and I'm not going to let him struggle." His words stung, each one a jab at my worth, my accomplishments, and I felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce, rising in my chest. Emily stepped up beside me, her voice trembling with rage as she said, "That's not your call to make, Dad. That money wasn't yours to give away." Noah nodded, his phone now tucked away, his voice quieter but firm as he added, "Yeah, that's messed up. I'd had my suspicions about Dad's spending for a while, little things that didn't add up, Like the new car he and Linda had bought last year, or the way he'd been dodging my questions about the trust. I'd done some digging a few weeks ago, after noticing a strange withdrawal in the trust's bank statements, and what I'd found had left me reeling. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone, my fingers steady as I opened the app, the screen glowing softly in the dim light. "You're lying, Dad," I said, my voice growing stronger, each word a hammer striking at his facade. "I checked the trust account. You didn't just give my share to Ethan, you spent part of it. There's a withdrawal for 10-0, transferred to a travel agency. You and Linda went on that fancy cruise to the Bahamas last year, didn't you?" A gasp rippled through the crowd, the sound sharp and collective, like a wave breaking against the shore. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her scarf falling to the floor as she stared at Dad, her eyes filling with tears. Aunt Susan shook her head, her voice low as she whispered to Mia, "I can't believe he'd do that." Mia's camera was back in her hands, her lens trained on Dad, capturing every moment of his unraveling. Ryan took a step closer, his voice a low growl as he muttered, "That's low, man." Ethan's face turned red, his hands clenching into fists as he looked at Linda, his voice small as he said, "Mom, did you know about this?" Linda's smile vanished, her eyes wide with panic as she stammered, "Tu didn't know where the money came from?" Dad's composure cracked, his face turning red as he slammed his hand on the podium, the whiskey glass tipping over, the amber liquid spilling across the wood. "That's enough, Jake!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall, but there was a desperation in his tone, a crack in his armor. "I did what I thought was best for this family, but the crowd wasn't on his side anymore." I could see the doubt in their faces, the way they shifted uncomfortably, their whispers growing louder, a mix of shock and disapproval. I set my phone down on the nearest table, my hands shaking now, but my resolve firm. "You stole from me, Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "And I'm not going to let you get away with it." The rest of the party felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from, the joy of Dad's retirement overshadowed by the bitter taste of betrayal. Some guests left early, their goodbyes awkward as they avoided my gaze, while others stayed, their conversations hushed as they stole glances at me and Dad. I sat on the patio with Emily and Noah, the cool night air brushing against my skin, the mountains in the distance now cloaked in darkness, their outlines barely visible against the starry sky. The bonfire crackled nearby, its warmth a small comfort as Emily handed me a glass of water, her voice soft but firm. "You didn't deserve that, Jake," she said, her hand resting on my arm. Noah nodded, his smirk replaced by a rare seriousness as he said, "Dad's got some nerve." Mom joined us, her scarf back around her shoulders, her eyes red from crying as she sat beside me, her voice trembling. "I had no idea, Jake," she said, her hand squeezing mine, the familiar scent of her lavender lotion grounding me. "I thought the trust was safe. I trusted him." I hugged her, my throat tight with emotion, the journal I'd brought for Dad now forgotten on the table inside, a symbol of a night that had gone so wrong. Aunt Susan and Mia came over, Susan's calming presence a quiet balm as she said, "You stood up for yourself, Jake." That took courage. Mia showed me a photo she'd taken of Dad at the podium, his face contorted with anger, and whispered, "I've got your back, cousin." Dad approached me later, after most of the guests had left, the hall nearly empty now, the fairy lights casting long shadows across the floor. He looked smaller somehow, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened, his face etched with regret as he stood in front of me, his hands in his pockets. "Jake, I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, the words heavy with guilt. "I thought I was doing the right thing for Ethan, but I shouldn't have touched your money. I'll make it right, I promise." His eyes were sincere, but there was a weariness in them, a weight I hadn't seen before, and I couldn't tell if I believed him. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine and smoke filling my lungs, and looked at him, my voice steady but firm. "Sorry isn't enough, Dad," I said, my words flowing smoothly, my anger tempered by exhaustion. "You stole from me, from Grandpa's legacy. If you want to make this right, you need to pay back every centaur you need to admit what you did to the whole family, publicly, at the next gathering. No excuses." He nodded, his shoulders slumping, his voice barely a whisper as he said, "I'll do it. I'll fix this." but there was a hesitation in his tone, a flicker of doubt that made me wonder if he'd follow through. In the days since, I've been trying to process what happened. Emily and Noah have been my rocks, helping me look into legal options, their support a reminder that I'm not alone. Ryan's been checking in, his texts full of bad puns that make me laugh despite everything, a small light in the darkness. Mom's been talking to a lawyer, her determination fierce as she fights for me, her voice steady as she says, "We'll get your money back, Jake." I've been thinking a lot about trust, about family, about what it means to forgive. Dad hasn't reached out since that night, and I don't know if he'll keep his promise. Part of me hopes he will, for Mom's sake, for the family's sake. But another part of me wonders if some betrayals run too deep to heal. If you enjoyed this dramatic story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more Reddit tales. Have you ever been betrayed by a parent? Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to hear your thoughts.